Okay. Right, we've got the camera. We know where it is. It's picking up the other stuff as well. So, lift up your hearts. Yeah. We lift them up to the Lord, and that's what we're about. We chose Psalm 139 because we thought it would speak to some of the unevennesses and the concerns that we might have that go through all age groups and all situations over this period of trying to get back into normality again. Some people seem to have cracked it and life continues as normal. Some people really struggle, and we'll all fit within the spectrum this morning. But we exist in a place where knowing that God has affection for us and attachment to us, they're the two words for love that you get in the Psalms in the Old Testament. One that signifies affection and one that signifies attachment. That all matters. And we've done supposed to be doing 6 sessions. We're actually only going to do 5 because we need to skip the session next week as we want to bring you up to date with some good stuff, some exciting stuff that's happening with Open Blue, and it's got implications all the way around. We'll be putting that on video as well if you can't be with us. But we want to tell you where we've got to and start a conversation about the implications. Conversation, I'm sure, is going to go on for months as we work out about that. But the session that we're going to miss is the really strange session, because if you look at Psalm 139, when you get to verse 19, there is a chunk there which is, oh, I forget what the words are, but it's something like, oh, I hate the wicked. I wish that you would get rid of wicked people. And it's plonk in the middle of this psalm about God's love and care. And when you ask yourself the question, why is that there? You can take 2 positions. One, which is often taken in Bible readings, is that it shouldn't be there and it gets left out. And the other is that that's the whole reason the psalm exists in the first place. That psalm was written by somebody who felt themselves to be under attack. And that it's suggested that it fits it within the Psalms of complaint, that it should have the title, God is my judge. Because God knows what's going on inside of me and nobody else does. Now that's always a dangerous thing to say, oh well, God knows, God's my father, he thinks I'm okay. But there is a big truth there as well. So behind this psalm is somebody who's under attack. And it's not necessarily about being under attack by people. The photograph from a couple of years back came up this week with that lovely table that Philippa did for us with loads of food on. And lots of people can remember the table, but I don't know whether anybody can remember the talk that went with it. The talk, you can, Isabella, can you? Because your dad did the talk on that occasion. And David brought something which was really significant to me and I have never forgot because it's made a real difference. It was about that bit where you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. And Dave suggested that perhaps we oughtn't consider our enemies to be people, but all the stuff, all the crap that attacks us in life, all the difficulties that we face, the feelings that arise from traffic jams and conflicts of time and feeling unwell and feeling low and all those sort of things. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies, whatever the difficulties are. And that has been a real help to me. So that even when you get really low and when you're thinking about going through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. It starts to come together in a clump. So, the overall message is that God is with us and He likes us, even when we're going through difficult stuff that we cannot change. Right? Even when we're in difficult stuff that is not going to change quickly, God is with us and He likes us and He knows all about it. Now, what I'd like to do is to get you all to mutter behind your masks in a COVID-safe sort of way the text with me. Okay? So here it is. Can you see that? It's a bit smaller than I would have ideally liked, but here we go. We're going from the NIV, and it reads this. Okay, together. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. How precious to me are your thoughts, God. How vast is the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. When I awake, I am still with you. Okay? I'm not going to pay any attention to the bit that starts how precious. It's too difficult, because actually probably a better translation will be how difficult to me are your thoughts, oh God. And once you go down that rabbit hole, it really becomes a bit hard. So we're going to concentrate on the first bit. And I want to get to this, go back one, please. Yeah. I better tell you because the transition's not all that clear. I want to get to the bit where it says all the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to me. Came to be. I think it's a beautiful picture and it's a complicated picture, and I think there's something we can take away. But first of all, let's have a look. Have you got a query? Question?
Are we supposed to only go to Psalm 18?
No, you can look at any of them. But stay in Psalms. There's 150, and what I would like to know at the end is certainly whether each of you have got a top 3 for a starting line for a psalm out of those. Right?
Just
So,
starting line of each verse.
hey, listen, there's always a work product at the end of this stuff.
Starting
Yeah.
line of each verse, and it actually makes sense.
It makes sense, like it's like a story.
Yeah, what we're after is the first line and how it impacts
The
you.
psalm.
How many
the
does
first line of the
that?
whole
Okay.
entire psalm.
150 psalms. You've wasted all of 5 minutes. So let's start with it. Yeah. Okay. Now where was I? Yeah, Dave, let's have a look at this bit. Look at this. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. My frame, my skeleton, my outline, my structure was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place. I just want to make 2 comments on this as we go past, because the picture is quite strong, isn't it, in your mind? Number 1, don't worry about the earth bit. That's just a figurative thing in ancient Near East culture for being in the womb anyway. But my frame was not hidden to you, hidden from you when I was made in the secret place. Here's 2 things. For people who are pregnant, I think that's a wonderful thing to meditate on. If you're talking to somebody who's expecting a child, point that out to them. And of course, point out to them about John being filled with the Holy Spirit from his mother's womb and that sort of stuff that goes back to God's care right from the beginning. I also think there's something that once again we won't get into, but it's a big issue, sometime we may need to. It talks as well there to the issue of lifelong disability as well. I know Carol mentioned that when she talked about being fearfully and wonderfully made, because I listened to the stuff while I was away. But it talks about that as well. God saw what was happening to us developmentally. It doesn't mean to say He planned it. And we can, I'll mention that again in a minute or 2. But that's a significant thing. And then there's this next little clause here. Your eyes saw my unformed body. Apparently, it's the word for seed or embryo, unformed body. And it just so happens that on Monday in Parliament they're discussing a very old act and changing it and bringing it up to date, which is the one that makes abortion completely legal. It puts, they want to remove it from the crime area of crime. And while you can understand that, doesn't help anybody it fitting within that sort of old legislation, which I think comes from halfway through the 19th century. But the Evangelical Alliance, who've got the same sort of values that we have got, saying the danger with that, like any danger, like any legislation that changes, is that you move the limits. What it does open to the possibility that you could go right up to the point of birth, and in terms of the statutory stuff, this is what they're saying, it just opens up the whole thing as far as abortion is concerned. Now, I don't know whether that's true. I've read the legislation, but haven't had time to read very much more. But what it does leave us with, if God's eyes saw my unformed body, that gives us a hint of the way God thinks about where life starts. Yeah? It certainly doesn't come at the point of viability where a child can live outside the womb. That somewhere along that line, God starts to see us as persons. Okay? And it led me to thinking and meditating on the fact that at the end of time, there are going to be many more persons than those who were ever born. Yeah? Many more persons that were written in God's book. And then I'd come on to the bit I want. How are we doing for time? Oh gosh, half of it, more than half of it's gone. So, here we go. Let's look at the next bit. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. So, get that in your mind, and let's put the next slide up with the first thing. Oh, okay, well, we'll leave it like that. You're supposed to go through a reveal pattern, but that's what happens when you change programs. It is a problem, right? All your days that were meant for me were written in your book. Now, because I started picking on Isabella, I'll just stay with that, yeah? It's because you're in a big transition at the moment, it makes sense. Now, does that mean that God had written down or specified what you were going to do as your degree subject? Even more hairy at the moment. Did he write down about your A-level grades? Does it mean that he knows the diagnosis of every disease that we're going to come across in our lives? Well, I don't know about this. There are some people for whom that's what it means. That our life is planned out step by step by step all the way through. In fact, that's the way I was brought up to believe. There was at any time you could be in the perfect will of God, or you could be in the permissive will of God, or you could be out of the will of God. I don't think that's very helpful. I can talk to you about why I don't think that is, but certainly there's a problem there, because what it does say is that life is not random. Life isn't random. And I think it really does give us an encouragement that when stuff goes wrong and our plan A fails, the plan that we sought God for, that we understood, that God's always got a plan B. And sometimes that plan B, when we look back on it, we'll wonder why there was ever any thought about the plan A. Because God is at work in our lives. So I would rather say, to take the edge off it, because you could talk about all the things that were destined for us were written in his book. But I think the word meant is probably better. All the days that were meant for me were written in your book. You've got to remember that God doesn't always get his will, if we look at it. You know, God actually created people, and then by the time Noah came along, he was saying God was sorry that he made people. And there are time and time again. It talks about in Ezekiel about the fact that God looked for somebody to stand in the gap. And there was nobody who would do it. Now, was God just messing about, looking for somebody when he knew there was going to be no one who stood in the gap? Or was it a real thing? How about when Jesus says, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, I've always wanted to gather you, but you wouldn't. Now, did Jesus really want it, or did he know they weren't going to take any notice anyway? It was a real thing. And when it says that God doesn't want anybody to go to hell, when God doesn't desire the death of the sinner, does it really mean that? Or does it mean that it's going around, I'll have you, and I'll have you, and I'll have you, and I'll have you, the rest of you come off. Yeah? Because that's the way sometimes people construe the scripture. Now, I accept the fact there are some people who are really thoughtful, really love God, who think one way, and there's some people who think the other, and I think that probably we'll find out on the day when we find out everything that none of us were right and the story was different. Okay? So I don't want to invest too much in that. But the next thing I wanted to say is the fact this is a positive thing that we're written in God's book. How do you like the idea that when we start out, we're in God's book and we have to do something to get out of it? And if you read Exodus 32, even with the golden calf, there were people whose names were in God's book, and God said, I've got the choice about whose name I'm going to rub out. It's nobody else's. And today, I want to assure you that your name is in God's book, and it always has been. Your name is in God's book. How does that feel? I find that very positive to think about the fact that all my days are written down. The next thing I wanted to say is about the process. It doesn't say that all our achievements are written in God's book. Okay? It doesn't say all our disappointments are written in God's book. All our high days and holidays are written in God's book. It's all our days. And I'd like us to finish off with a bit of prayer around that. So it's a process. Then just hurrying up here, because I've got 2 minutes, but I'm going to take a few more, because I know Carol will be going up for ages, isn't it? The next thing is this, about getting perspective. I've been doing some stuff recently that has resulted in my having to write a guided timeline of my life. Okay? I only give you a bit bored like this, and when you're as old as I am, there's quite a lot of life getting on that. But I've been working through that. And I put down some things, and they get you to mark up things that are really significant. And there was stuff in there that I thought was very significant, some which wasn't so. And then we went on our holiday. On our way, we went to visit some friends, a guy that I'd worked with, and on the way back, we visited another couple who we both knew quite well, and had been part of the first theatre group we worked with. But I'd known that guy since I was about 16, he was about 14. He was in my sister's class at school and come to know God when he was a teenager, in a real move of God in the church we were in among young people at the time. And when we were chatting, he started to talk about this theatre group. And for me, the theatre group that we had from 1972 to 1974, I think, was a really small thing in my history. It was just something that we went through to get to this next place. It got us out of one church, it got us to start in another one. And that's where it was. But talking to this guy, he actually sang to me a song that I'd written the words for from one of the shows that we did, one of the touring shows. And I'd forgotten about it, I remembered it. He started to tell stories about where we've been and what we've done and all sorts of stuff. And he said to me, he said, Dave, he said, do you know that when I have a combination lock, I still use the numbers in the name of that theatre group as my combination lock? And I thought, wow. For him, that was a really significant time. And I'd sort of dismissed that. But there were about a dozen people who were a little bit younger than us. Wendy and I were, 22, 23 at the time. And a load of it happened in the back garden of this little small holding where we lived, in an old metal shed, the painting of scenery, the development of stuff, the van and the stage units that we used to go around with. And for some people, that was absolutely crucial in their life. And as you look back, it's significant. As you look forward, there are days that God has got written in the book. Every day, all my days are written in God's book. And of course, today is written there as well. What about today? Because I think the final word there is the word about potential. And I'd like to pray for people, but I think if you guys could set up the next song. Don't want to make this a big emotional thing, but sometimes it helps when we've got music in the background in front of people. So if you can do some noodling. By the way, Chris, I just love the accompaniment on that joyful. I thought absolutely. It wasn't.
It's too hard for me to play.
Who played it?
Somebody on YouTube.
Really? Yeah. Well, I was thinking actually, I can't even play that other song. Yeah. Anyway, oh dear, I didn't mean to.
It's fine. It's the only one I haven't played.
But yeah, well, we're getting ready. I'd like to actually go back to this thing about potential and the idea that God's got His name written in the book. You see, the fact that it's going to be played out in days, the fact that Isabella's here now and we're going to be praying for her in September and we're going to be praying for her all the way through the university days and we're going to be praying for one another. We're going to be continuing to pray for Roy. By the way, if you don't know, Roy's radiotherapy has been over and done with. It's going to help him. He's still got some effects that he's going to have. Unfortunately, it hasn't improved the quality of his brain, but there you go. That's something we have to live with. It's still the same old Roy. But it's great news, and of course Linda's really relieved that it's got over. But God knows every day as it goes through. And I was reading something as I do in the week, and there was a chunk out of a sermon that had been preached by John Donne in 1642 on Christmas Day. And in it he said, "We never come to God for our daily bread, and God says to us, sorry, you should have come yesterday." Okay? Never come and he says, sorry, should have come yesterday. We never come to God for our daily bread and we find the shop shut and says, I've run out of bread, if you come tomorrow, you'll get bread. God's availability to us is 24/7, 365 days a year. In that way, it's a much of a step beyond the manna, because with manna, you had to collect enough for the Sabbath, didn't you, on the 6th day. But God's availability to us, God's plan for our days, is actually there. And as we worship in this last little bit, particularly as you can't sing properly, as you've got to reflect anyway, I'd like you to go through that, because, you know, there is no promise that the pain's going to stop. There is no promise that everything's going to be okay. Those things are deferred for a long time. And in our life, Peter says, without tribulation. That's the way it's going to be. But what we do understand is that God has the capacity for us to see the potential where we are, to reach into where we are, to touch us where we are, because of his affection for us and his attachment to us. That's what I'm excited about. Right? That's what I have been thinking about this week. I hope the idea that all the days that are meant for you are written in God's book is going to be counted for you as well. Let's turn our hearts to God for the last